But, you know, I feel like the important sort of data point, and, you know, Steve talks about it a lot. He's going to probably talk about it a little more tonight, is that these are white Christians. That this is a state that is overrepresented by white Christians that are going to participate in these caucuses, especially tonight. Earlier today, reached out to Robbie Jones from the Public Religion Research Institute, knowing that we were going to talk about Iowa. And this is a hyper-evangelical white state. And he said the following to me: Iowa is about 61% white Christian. The country as a whole is approximately 41% white Christian. And in Iowa, we're talking about evangelical white Christians. And he said the following. Because I asked him, what do they get out of supporting Donald Trump? Because he keeps losing, he keeps delivering losses and losses and losses. And he said the following: they see themselves as the rightful inheritors of this country, and Trump has promised to give it back to them. All the things that we think about electability, about, you know, what are people gaming out, or none of that matters when you believe that God has given you this country, that it is yours, and that everyone who is not a white conservative Christian is a fraudulent American, is a less.
A few moments later.
CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the Iowa caucuses. CNN can make this projection based on his overwhelming lead in our entrance poll of Iowa caucus goers and some initial votes that are coming in. The former president pulling off a huge early victory in his bid to return to the White House. Trump easily defeating his top opponents, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, who are now in a high-stakes fight for second place.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about what everybody knew would happen going into the Iowa caucus, the first primary election of 2024, okay? The first chance for voters to cast a vote for former President Trump after the 2020 election, and Trump has won in a landslide victory, okay? And again, this should be no surprise to anybody that's paying attention, because in this case, the polls seem to be correct, okay? They seem to be pretty spot on in regards to the support of each candidate, as it was predicted that Trump would get over 50% of the vote. So it seems that's what he's going to get. We currently have 38% of the vote in. However, again, the race has been called for Trump. He's probably going to finish in that 50% range, close to 50%, which again is an overwhelming victory. I mean, this is historic for former President Trump. This is a great American comeback that is being orchestrated by Trump in the first primary race of the 2024 season. Again, this is a great moment for Trump. I'm pretty sure Team Trump, they're celebrating. He has a whole lot of momentum going into the next race. And it seems like if things keep up, Trump may win literally every single state, okay? And we're going to talk about some of the implications of the results here. But first, of course, you know that the mainstream liberal media is having a full-blown meltdown over the fact that Trump essentially blew out the competition in the first race of the primary season. And we have to talk about no other than Reid of MSNBC and Rachel Maddow crying racism over the results of the Iowa caucus, because of course they have no other way to analyze the situation outside of trying to blame white Christians. Take a look.
New Hampshire. And I think to the point that you made, Steph, I mean, it's the elephant in the room. She's still a brown lady that's got to try to win in a party that is deeply anti-immigrant and which accepts the notion that you can say immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. She's getting, you know, birthered by Donald Trump. And I don't care how much the donor class likes her, which will ramp up a lot, the better she does in New Hampshire. So it's still a challenge. I don't see how she becomes the nominee of that party with Donald Trump still around. I can't picture it happening. Maybe it could happen. Ron DeSantis' only argument for staying in it is he's the white guy, that he can still make the appeal to white evangelicals.
While we have, it is not. If we are worried about the rise of authoritarianism in this country, we are worried about potential rise of fascism in this country. If we're worried about our democracy falling to an authoritarian and potentially fascist form of government, the leader who is trying to do that is part of that equation. But people wanting that is a much bigger part of that equation. And the American electorate is made up of two major parties. One of those parties has been flirting with extremism on the ultra-right for a very long time. They've brought them in a way that they haven't been central to Republican electoral politics ever before, and I know because I've been studying this. But once you have radicalized one major party so that those are the preferences of the people who adhere to your party, the leader's interchangeable. And yes, Trumpism is sometimes what we call it. MAGA movement is probably a better way to do it. But there is an authoritarian movement inside Republican politics that isn't being bamboozled by Trump. They are pushing Trump to get more and more extreme, because the more extreme things he says, the more they adhere to him. And that is coming from a very large proportion of the American right that adheres to the Republican Party. And that's why this is a Republican Party problem more than it is the problem of one man and his leader.
Doesn't that tie together the fixed interference and, you know, all the things that Trump is actually accused of? People should be reminded of it. I mean, this weekend, I even forgot. It was the 3-year anniversary of his second impeachment. Never mentioned. The only reason why I remembered is because it popped up on my Facebook on this day. I had pictures of the newspaper covers of Trump impeached again for January 6th. No mention of that. That's malpractice, in my opinion, because if the American people aren't reminded of who this motherfucker is, it gets normalized. And then we have what we have, where millions of people think it's okay to vote for Donald Trump and who wants to be a dictator.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Okay, the takeaway from MSDNC is that, well, white Christians in Iowa are racist, okay? Either they're racist against Nikki Haley because, you know, she's Indian, which is what Joy Reid was implying, okay? And her analysis is all about race. Well, Ron DeSantis is white. That's the only reason he should continue to stay in the race, okay? Trump's a fascist. These people really do hate middle America, okay? They really do, okay? That's the takeaway from the mainstream liberal media. They hate middle America. But again, it is sweet to, you know, drink their tears, right? The liberal tears of them watching Trump have an epic comeback, okay? And that's essentially what happened tonight. America has spoken and said, look, we want Trump back, at least in Iowa, that is. It is the first state. It's the only state. But I don't expect anything to really change moving forward, okay? But you do have people that are in the DeSantis campaign and some of the other campaigns. They are calling foul on what happened in Iowa because the results were decided very quickly. I mean, they basically called a race for Trump like 30 minutes into voting. And you have people like Team DeSantis currently calling foul over that. Take a look.
Well, what happened tonight is appalling. The media calling the race for Donald Trump before votes have been cast. I personally spoke in multiple precincts in front of hundreds of voters. And while I'm presenting and delivering the closing argument to Ron DeSantis and actually flipping voters, people start getting alerts on their phones saying the race is over before they've even won. One guy said, why do we even bother voting if it's already over? That is absurd. That challenges the very tenets of our Republican democracy, and that should not happen. We still expect a good night. I know, it's going to take a while for votes to come in, but you can't taint the process like that. Having a victory declared before people have even voted, before arguments have been heard, that's not right.
But even with Team DeSantis calling foul, the results are clear. Clearly, Trump is definitely going to be the nominee. You even have some people on Team DeSantis basically saying, hey, well, we should probably just rally around Trump at this point.
Republicans have kind of a real big choice ahead. Do we all galvanize around Donald Trump now, or do we wait a month or a few weeks? And I think, even as someone who is a big supporter of Ron DeSantis, I think that tonight, with this decisive victory for Donald Trump, I think it is time for Republicans to galvanize behind Donald Trump. I do believe he's going to be our nominee, so it's time to set our sights on the general and let's get to work.
Yeah, so you've seen that, you heard that, okay? I think that people are obviously seeing the writing on the wall in regards to the direction of this party, who this party still belongs to, right? And I think that the dominoes are going to fall in the direction that they obviously are going to go, right? And that's going to happen sooner rather than later. Now, here is my takeaway from the results as they are right now, as of the making of this video at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, on the day of caucus voting, where Trump has about 50% of the vote. DeSantis is at 22%, Haley's at 20%, and Vivek Ramaswamy is at 8%, okay? And nobody else really matters. Now, my first takeaway is that, well, the polls were accurate, at least in Iowa. And I say that this is important because up until this caucus, we have been using the polls to predict what would happen. This result indicates that the polls, at least in Iowa, were accurate. Okay, so, hey, it's accurate. Okay, the polls were spot on in regards to the result. Trump was dominating throughout the primary season, and lo and behold, the first day of voting, he's dominating. Now, my second takeaway from this is that Ron DeSantis needs to not only finish in second place, but also get at least 30% of the vote to justify staying in the race. Because for him, his whole campaign was about Iowa. It was about winning Iowa because it gave him the best chance of winning, probably because of the evangelical vote, right? That's what he was banking on. And the reason why you know that is because the 6-week abortion ban that he signed in Florida, after the midterms were over, in the middle of the night, so that nobody really knew about it. The reason why he did that was a play for the evangelical vote in Iowa. His whole campaign from the beginning was banking on DeSantis win in Iowa and picking up steam and then going into New Hampshire, South Carolina, and winning. Now, with DeSantis essentially getting blown out in Iowa, okay, if he's not really competitive, I mean, losing by 30 points to Trump is not competitive, okay? I'm just keeping it 100. $150 million is not going to change the outcome for DeSantis, okay? So spending more money isn't really going to make a difference. If his donors decide to pull out and to stop donating to him, he's done. And if I was somebody donating to Ron DeSantis, I don't think I want to burn my money on fire. I think this result, considering how this was the state that Ron DeSantis was banking on the most, I think that this signals that Ron DeSantis effectively, his campaign is over, right? Like he doesn't really have a shot. So that being said, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley performing at 20%. Again, this was predicted by the polls. You have some Democrats that crossed over to vote for Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley had a late surge in Iowa. However, again, she got blown out. Okay, I'm surprised that she performed this well. It really blows my mind that there are literally 20% of Republican voters in any state that would vote for Nikki Haley, but that is what we have. Okay, that's the current state of the GOP. But for her, again, this is not as bad as DeSantis because she really wasn't banking on Iowa. She's banking on New Hampshire and her own state, South Carolina, right? So for her, she really has to pick up her campaign in New Hampshire if she wants any shot of winning. However, again, I don't think that the play here is for Nikki Haley to actually win any states. I actually think that the play is for Nikki Haley to continue to stay in the race and then for Trump to be pulled out of the race for whatever reason, right? I think that is the reason why Nikki Haley is probably going to stay in. And that's why I said whether or not DeSantis drops out is going to be fascinating, because if he drops out, now all of a sudden we got to see where his votes go to. Is his votes going to go to Trump or are they going to go to Haley? My guess is that they're going to go to both. They'll probably split between Trump and Nikki Haley, and probably some will go to Vivek Ramaswamy, who finished in 4th, okay? And he got 8% of the vote. Vivek, he did not underperform. He overperformed just slightly a little bit, but he was around 4 to 5 to 6%, okay? I don't think I've seen any polls in Iowa where Vivek actually was getting more than 5 to 6% of the vote. So getting that 8%, if he can cross 10% in the finish, that for him would be overperformance. And it's not bad considering how nobody knew who the guy was a year ago. And to go from that to 10% in the Iowa caucus and nobody knew who he was a year ago, I don't think that that's necessarily a terrible result for him. But this result is a good and a bad thing for him, right? It's bad in the sense that obviously he didn't cross 10%. Again, maybe he will. He didn't finish above Haley. He didn't finish above DeSantis. But the honest to God truth is that the only way that he would finish above Haley or DeSantis is that he probably have to take a significant amount of votes away from DeSantis, Haley, and Trump, right? Which, you know, in that scenario, again, I think is very unlikely considering how he is an outsider. He's a new guy to the scene. And at that point, he would actually legitimately be a threat to Trump, and there would be massive pressure on Vivek Ramaswamy to drop out if he actually finished competitively, because people would start to argue that, well, he's taking away enough votes from Trump that he's actually hurting Trump, and that would create a very, very, very not good situation between Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy, in which we already saw that there was some issues kind of going into the Iowa caucus. But with Vivek finishing in fourth with less than 10% of the vote as of right now, that basically proves that Vivek's not a real threat to Trump. He's not taking away enough votes from Trump to make it so that, again, he is actually really hurting Trump, which honestly justifies him staying in the race, right? If he says that he's in the race simply as a way to be a backup if Trump gets pulled out of the race for whatever reason, then him polling less than 10% actually justifies him continuing to stay in the race, right? I mean, I'm just saying, if that's what his plan actually is, then he kind of needs to continue to poll low. I know it doesn't really make sense, but it actually really does if you think about it, because if Vivek's not a real threat to pull a significant amount of votes away from Trump, then it doesn't matter if he's in the race, right? It doesn't matter. And as long as he's in the race, then if something happens to Trump, then there's a guy that's in the race that can automatically kind of take the reins away from Nikki Haley if, again, Trump is pulled out of the race for whatever reason. But who knows if Vivek will continue to stay in the race after this. I'm not sure exactly what his strategy is moving forward, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. So with that being said, that's my takeaway so far. Maybe I will cover this again tomorrow, but this is my quick kind of off the top of my head take. I haven't really had that much time to think about it. This is my instant reaction. No surprises here. Trump is still the king of the Republican Party, and this first primary result just proves that Trump is making the great American comeback, and he's probably going to carry this momentum into all the states moving forward. Again, he could win all 50 states. This primary could be the most least competitive primary that we've ever seen. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.